Now close your eyes and let yourself be swept back in time. This story, which will take you on a journey into the distant past, will offer you a peaceful atmosphere for sleep. Beyond the noise of today, beyond the hustle and bustle of modern life, to a place where the desert meets the river, where golden sands stretch endlessly under the eternal sun. We are traveling to Egypt, a country with over 5,000 years of recorded history and roots, stretching back to the mists of prehistory. Take a deep breath. Feel yourself relaxing as we begin this ancient journey together. Let the tensions of your day dissolve like morning mist over the Nile. Long before the great pyramids rose against the sky, long before pharaohs wore the double crown, Egypt was a very different place. Picture yourself standing at the edge of the Sahara Desert, but this is not the endless sea of sand you might imagine. This is Egypt 10,000 years ago, during a time when the climate was much wetter, much greener. Where today there is only desert, there were once grasslands dotted with acacia trees. Herds of wild cattle grazed across these ancient savannas. Gazelles leaped through the grasses. Lions stalked their prey in the cooling shadows of evening, but something was changing. Gradually, over thousands of years, the climate grew drier. The grasslands slowly receded. The animals moved away or adapted or disappeared. And the people, those resourceful, resilient humans, they moved toward the one constant source of water in an increasingly arid landscape, the Nile River. The Nile, let yourself imagine this extraordinary river. It flows northward, unusual among the world's great rivers, traveling from the heart of Africa all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, in a land that receives almost no rainfall. The Nile is everything. It is life itself, flowing through the desert like a blue-green ribbon of possibility. Around 7,000 years ago, people began to settle permanently along the Nile's banks. They discovered something miraculous about this river. Every year, with remarkable regularity, the Nile would flood. The waters would rise, gently and predictably, spreading across the floodplain. And when the waters receded, they left behind a layer of rich, dark, fertile silt, perfect for growing crops. These early settlers learned to plant their seeds in this fertile mud. They cultivated wheat and barley. They raised cattle, sheep, and goats. They built simple houses from mud brick, that humble material that would remain fundamental to Egyptian architecture for thousands of years. Small villages appeared along the river, clusters of homes surrounded by fields that turned green each year after the flood. Life developed its own rhythm, tied completely to the Nile's annual cycle. The flooding season, called Akite, came in summer when the river swelled with distant rains from the Ethiopian highlands. Then came Puree, the growing season, when the waters receded and farmers planted their crops. Finally, Shemu, the harvest season, when the crops were gathered before the heat of summer returned and the river would flood once more as centuries passed. These farming villages grew more sophisticated. People began to specialize in different crafts. Some became skilled potters, creating beautiful vessels decorated with geometric patterns and images of the animals and plants around them. Others became experts at working stone, crafting tools and weapons. Weavers created textiles from flax, that remarkable plant that grew so well in Egyptian soil. The villagers traded with each other. The resources of the villagers in the south, near the first cataclysm of the Nile, in what we now call Upper Egypt, where the Great Aswan Dam is located, differed from those of the villagers in Lower Egypt, where the Nile spread across its vast delta before flowing into the sea. Over time, these trade relations became more complex. Villages formed alliances, and communication between them became increasingly intricate. Larger settlements dominated smaller ones. Thus, the seeds of political organization began to be sown. By around 3500 BCE, Egypt was divided into numerous small kingdoms, each ruling a section of the Nile Valley or Delta. We call these early kingdoms nomes, and they each had their own local deity, their own symbols, their own rulers. But the forces of consolidation were at work. Stronger kingdoms absorbed weaker ones. The number of independent entities gradually decreased. This process, fascinating and complex, unfolded over centuries. It wasn't a simple or straightforward path. There were advances and retreats, alliances formed and broken, conquests and rebellions. But the general direction was clear, toward larger, more centralized political units. Archaeological evidence shows us that by around 3200 BCE, Egypt had effectively consolidated into two major kingdoms. One ruled Upper Egypt, the southern region, narrow and running along the Nile Valley. Its rulers wore the white crown and took the sedge plant as their symbol. The other ruled Lower Egypt, the northern delta region, wider and more spread out. Its rulers wore the red crown and took the bee as their symbol. These two kingdoms existed in a state of interaction and competition. They traded with each other. They influenced each other culturally, and inevitably, they came into conflict with each other, each seeking to dominate the fertile Nile Valley. The stage was set for one of the most important events in Egyptian history, the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt into a single kingdom. This moment, shrouded partly in legend and partly in historical fact, would mark the beginning of pharaonic Egypt, the beginning of one of the longest-lasting civilizations in human history. As you relax deeper, let yourself appreciate the vast sweep of time we've already covered. Thousands of years of slow development, of human communities gradually mastering their environment, learning to work with the Nile's rhythms, developing the skills and knowledge and social structures that would form the foundation of everything to come. Rest now in this ancient time, at the very dawn of Egyptian civilization, as we prepare to witness the birth of the pharaonic age, the Old Kingdom. Age of the pyramids breathes slowly and deeply as we move forward in time. To around 3100 BCE, a powerful ruler from Upper Egypt, a man whose name has come down to us as Num, or perhaps Menes, launches a military campaign northward. His armies, organized and disciplined, march down the Nile Valley and into the Delta region. The details of this conquest are lost to time, but the result is clear and momentous. The two kingdoms are united. Nama becomes the first pharaoh of a unified Egypt. He wears both crowns, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, often combined into a single double crown that symbolizes his rule over both lands. He establishes a new capital city called Memphis, strategically located at the junction between Upper and Lower Egypt, at the apex of the Nile Delta. From this central location, he and his successors would rule the entire length of the Nile Valley. The unification of Egypt marks the beginning of what historians call the early dynastic period, which transitions into the Old Kingdom around 2686 BCE. Let yourself drift into this ancient world, this time of kings who were not just rulers but were considered gods themselves, living manifestations of divine power on earth. The pharaoh was everything in Egyptian society. He owned all the land. He commanded all resources. He led the army. He served as the chief priest, mediating between the gods and humanity. The entire Egyptian state was organized around the divine king and his court. Supporting the pharaoh was an increasingly sophisticated bureaucracy. Scribes, those educated men who could read and write the hieroglyphic script, kept meticulous records of everything: harvests, taxes, building projects, military campaigns. These scribes formed the administrative backbone of the state, and literacy was the key to advancement in Egyptian society. If a farmer's son learned to read and write, he could rise to positions of great power and influence. The Egyptians developed a remarkably complex view of the cosmos and their place in it. They believed in many gods, each with their own domain and powers. Ra, the sun god, traveled across the sky each day in his solar bark. Osiris ruled the underworld and judged the dead. Isis, the great mother goddess, possessed powerful magic. Horus, the falcon-headed god, was associated with kingship. Each pharaoh was considered a living Horus, but the Old Kingdom is remembered primarily for one thing: the pyramids. These massive stone monuments, which still stand today, millennia after their construction, represent one of the greatest architectural achievements in human history. The tradition of building pyramids began in the reign of Pharaoh Djoser. Around 2650 BCE, his vizier, a man named Imhotep, designed something revolutionary. Instead of the traditional mastaba tomb, a flat-topped rectangular structure, Imhotep created a step pyramid at Saqqara, near Memphis. This pyramid rose in 6 distinct steps, reaching toward the sky. A massive stone stairway by which the dead pharaoh's spirit could ascend to join the gods. Imhotep's step pyramid was built entirely of stone, a relatively new building material at this scale. It required enormous resources: quarrying the stone, transporting it to the site, carefully placing each block. The pyramid was surrounded by a massive complex of courtyards, temples, and ceremonial buildings, all enclosed within a limestone wall. Future pharaohs looked at Djoser's pyramid and were inspired to build their own. Each king wanted his tomb to be more impressive, more magnificent than his predecessors. The pyramid form evolved. The steps were eventually filled in to create smooth-sided pyramids, their faces rising at a precise angle toward the sky. Then came Pharaoh Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, who reigned around 2580 BCE. Khufu decided to build the largest pyramid ever constructed, a monument so massive that it would dominate the landscape at Giza. Just outside modern Cairo, picture the construction of the Great Pyramid as you lie here relaxed and comfortable. Imagine the desert plateau of Giza, carefully leveled to provide a stable foundation. Imagine thousands of workers organized into teams, quarrying limestone blocks from nearby sites. Each block weighs, on average, about 2.5 tons. The workers cut these blocks free using copper tools and wooden wedges, then loaded them onto sledges and dragged them to the construction site. Contrary to later myths, these workers were not slaves. Archaeological evidence from their living quarters shows they were well-fed Egyptian laborers, probably working in rotation, perhaps as a form of tax payment to the pharaoh. During the flood season, when agricultural work was impossible, farmers from throughout Egypt would come to work on the pyramid, receiving food, shelter, and clothing in return for their labor. The Great Pyramid required approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. It rose to a height of about 146 meters, making it the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years. The precision of its construction is remarkable. The base is level too within a few centimeters. The sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. Inside, narrow passages and chambers were built into the structure, including the king's chamber, where Khufu's sarcophagus was placed. The outer surface was originally covered with fine white limestone casing stones, polished to a brilliant finish. In the Egyptian sun, the pyramid would have gleamed like a beacon, visible for miles across the desert. At the very top was a capstone, possibly covered in gold, catching the first rays of the morning sun. Khufu's son, Khafir, built his own pyramid at Giza, slightly smaller than his father's, but placed on higher ground to make it appear equally impressive. Khafir also built the Great Sphinx, that mysterious limestone statue with the body of a lion and a human head, possibly representing the pharaoh himself. Watching eternally over his tomb complex, the third major pyramid at Giza was built by grandson of Khufu. Though smaller than the other two, it was no less carefully constructed, and parts of its lower sections were cased in red granite brought from Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south. As you rest here, imagine standing before these pyramids in their original glory, white limestone blazing in the sun, the vast necropolis of Giza spread out across the desert, a city of the dead built to last forever. These monuments speak to us across the millennia about the ambitions of the pharaohs, about their desire for immortality, about the extraordinary organizational capabilities of the old kingdom state. Life for ordinary. Egyptians during the Old Kingdom followed patterns established centuries earlier. Most people were farmers, working the land during the growing and harvest seasons. The Nile's annual flood remained the central fact of existence. Everyone understood that Mat, the Egyptian concept of cosmic order, balance, and truth, depended on the proper functioning of this cycle. Villages consisted of mud brick houses clustered together. Inside, families lived simply. They slept on woven reed mats or simple beds. They cooked flatbread in clay ovens. They ate a diet based primarily on bread, beer, onions, and occasionally fish from the Nile. Meat was expensive and rare, usually reserved for festivals and special occasions. Women in ancient Egypt enjoyed more rights than women in many other ancient civilizations. They could own property, initiate divorce, conduct business, and testify in court. Many women worked outside the home as weavers, bakers, or perfume makers. Some women even achieved positions of significant power, serving as priestesses or, in rare cases, even ruling as pharaoh. Children played with toys that would seem familiar today: balls, dolls, wooden animals. They played board games, including Note, a popular game that had religious significance, believed to represent the journey of the soul through the afterlife. Boys typically learned their father's trade, while girls learned from their mothers. The skills of running a household, the Egyptian religion permeated every aspect of life. Each day, priests in temples throughout Egypt would perform rituals to honor the gods, ensuring that Mat was maintained. The priests would wake the gods' statue, bathe it, dress it, offer it food and drink, and provide entertainment through music and dance. These rituals were believed to keep the cosmos functioning properly. Death was not viewed as an ending, but as a transition to another form of existence. The Egyptians believed that the human being consisted of multiple spiritual components: the Ka, a life force; the Ba, roughly equivalent to personality; and others. For these spiritual components to continue existing after death, the physical body needed to be preserved. This belief led to the development of mummification. Initially, mummification was a privilege reserved for royalty and the very wealthy. The process was complex and time-consuming, taking about 70 days to complete. The internal organs were removed and preserved separately in special jars. The body was dried out using natron, a naturally occurring salt. Then it was wrapped in layers of linen bandages, often with protective amulets placed between the layers. Finally, the mummy was placed in a coffin, or sometimes several nested coffins, and laid to rest in a tomb. The tomb was filled with everything the deceased might need in the afterlife: food, drink, furniture, clothing, jewelry, tools, even small figurines called shabtis that were believed to come to life and perform labor for the deceased in the afterlife. The Old Kingdom pharaohs believed that they, as gods, would live eternally. The pyramids were machines for resurrection, designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful transition to the afterlife and his continued existence among the gods. But even the mighty Old Kingdom could not last forever. By around 2200 BCE, centralized power began to weaken. The provincial governors, called nomarchs, had gradually become more independent and powerful. Climate change may have played a role, with lower Nile floods leading to reduced harvests and economic stress. The authority of the pharaoh diminished. Egypt fragmented once again into competing regional powers. This period, known as the First Intermediate Period, was a time of political disunity and social upheaval, but it would not last. The Egyptian state had deep roots. The desire for unity, for the restoration of Mat, remained strong. Eventually, new leaders would emerge to reunify the country and usher in a new golden age. Rest now in the knowledge of the Old Kingdom's grandeur, of pyramids rising against the sky, of a civilization that created monuments for eternity. The Middle Kingdom, classical age. Let yourself drift forward in time now, through the troubled years of the First Intermediate Period, through decades of division and conflict, until we reach a new dawn around 2050 BCE, a powerful family from the city of Thebes in Upper Egypt. The 11th dynasty launches a campaign to reunify the country. Their efforts succeed, and Egypt is once again united under a single pharaoh. This begins what we call the Middle Kingdom, often considered the classical age of Egyptian civilization. The trauma of the First Intermediate Period had affected the Egyptian psyche profoundly. The confident certainty of the Old Kingdom, the belief that the divine order was unshakable, had been challenged. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs and their subjects approached the world with a more reflective, sometimes pessimistic outlook. The Middle Kingdom pharaohs were powerful rulers, but they presented themselves differently than their Old Kingdom predecessors. They emphasized their role as good shepherds of their people, as protectors and providers rather than distant gods. Portraits of Middle Kingdom pharaohs show them with more realistic, sometimes careworn features. Rather than the idealized youth of earlier royal sculpture, the capital was established at Ijtwa, a new city built south of Memphis. From here, the Middle Kingdom pharaohs administered their realm with an even more developed bureaucracy than before. The government was highly organized, with various departments handling different aspects of administration: agriculture, treasury, justice, public works. Military affairs, one of the great achievements of the Middle Kingdom, was the expansion of Egyptian control southward into Nubia, the land south of Egypt along the Nile, in what is now southern Egypt and northern Sudan. Nubia was rich in resources that Egypt coveted: gold, copper, precious stones, ebony, ivory, and exotic animal skins. The pharaohs built a series of massive mud brick fortresses along the Nile in Nubia, designed to control, trade, and assert Egyptian dominance. Walking among these columns, you would feel dwarfed by their size, surrounded by surfaces covered with carved hieroglyphs and painted scenes depicting the pharaohs presenting offerings to the gods. On the west bank of the Nile at Thebes lay the necropolis, the city of the dead. Here, in a hidden valley that would become known as the Valley of the Kings, the new kingdom pharaohs carved their tombs deep into the mountainside. These were not the prominent pyramids of the Old Kingdom, but secret chambers, hidden and sealed, designed to protect the pharaoh's mummy and treasures from tomb robbers. The Valley of the Kings is dominated by a natural pyramid-shaped peak, which may have been one reason this site was chosen. The tombs themselves descended through long corridors deep into the rock, with walls covered in religious texts and colorful scenes depicting the pharaoh's journey through the underworld. The burial chamber held the pharaoh's mummified body in a series of nested coffins, surrounded by the goods he would need in the afterlife. Despite all efforts at security, most of these tombs were eventually robbed in antiquity. Only one survived substantially intact until modern times, the tomb of Tutankhamun, which we'll discuss shortly. The early New Kingdom pharaohs were remarkable individuals. Thutmose the first led military campaigns deep into Nubia and Syria. His daughter, Hatshepsut, would become one of the most unusual pharaohs in Egyptian history. Hatshepsut initially served as regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III, who was just a child when his father died. But Hatshepsut was not content to remain in the background. Within a few years, she had herself crowned as pharaoh, not as a queen regent, but as a full king. She adopted royal titulary, wore the ceremonial false beard, and was depicted in royal art wearing male pharaonic regalia. Hatshepsut's reign was long and prosperous. She focused more on trade and building projects than military conquest. Though she did lead at least one military campaign to Nubia, her greatest achievement was an expedition to the land of Punt, which she had commemorated in detailed reliefs on her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. This temple, rising in terraces against the cliffs of the Theban necropolis, is one of the most visually striking monuments in Egypt. Its clean, horizontal lines contrast beautifully with the natural rock formations behind it. The temple was designed by an architect named Senanmet, who may have been more than just Hatshepsut's official. Some scholars suggest they had a romantic relationship. Though evidence is circumstantial, the reliefs in the temple show the Punt expedition in detail. Egyptian ships sailing down the Red Sea, arriving in Punt, trading with the local inhabitants, loading the ships with incense trees, myrrh, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals, including baboons. The reliefs even show the Queen of Punt, depicted as quite corpulent, leading some modern scholars to speculate about what medical condition she might have had. After Hatshepsut's death, Thutmose III finally ruled as sole pharaoh. He proved to be one of the greatest military commanders in Egyptian history. Over 17 campaigns, he extended Egyptian power throughout Syria. His most famous victory came at the Battle of Megiddo, where he defeated a coalition of Canaanite city-states. The detailed account of this battle, preserved in inscriptions at Karnak, is one of the earliest detailed battle accounts from ancient times. Thutmose III was also a prolific builder and patron of the arts. Late in his reign, he ordered Hatshepsut's name and image to be erased from many monuments and removed from the king lists. This was not, as once thought, immediate revenge by a stepson who resented his stepmother, since he waited decades to do this. More likely, he was trying to restore the proper succession, erasing the anomaly of a female pharaoh to ensure that the legitimate male line appeared unbroken. The new kingdom was also a time of religious development and, eventually, religious crises. The god Aman, worshipped at Thebes, rose to supreme prominence, eventually being combined with Ra, the ancient sun god, to become Amun-Ra, king of the gods. The priesthood of Ammon grew enormously wealthy and powerful, supported by the vast landholdings and tribute given to their god. Morning in the village. The farmer's day begins. The houses are made of mud brick, that humble material that has housed Egyptians since the beginning of their civilization. The bricks are made from Nile mud mixed with straw, shaped in wooden molds, and dried in the sun. They are cool in the heat of the day and retain warmth during the cool nights. The houses are mostly single-story, though some wealthier families have 2 levels. They are practical, designed for the Egyptian climate, small windows to keep out the sun, flat roofs where people sleep on hot nights, and internal courtyards where much of daily life takes place. Let yourself enter one of these houses, the home of a farmer named Nakht. He is already awake, though the sun has not fully risen. His wife Isit is grinding grain on a saddle quern, crushing barley between 2 stones. The rhythmic sound, a morning music that has echoed through Egyptian villages for thousands of years. Nakht splashes water on his face from a clay jar, then wraps a simple kilt around his waist. This is his work clothes, practical and comfortable. His skin is deeply tanned from years working in the sun. His hands are calloused, strong from handling the plow and hoe. He is not a wealthy man, but he is not poor either. He farms a plot of land that belongs to the temple of Amun-Ra, paying rent in the form of a portion of his harvest. His children are beginning to stir. His oldest son, also called Nakht, is 12 years old enough to work in the fields with his father. His daughter, Merit, is 10, and she helps her mother with household tasks. The 2 younger children, still asleep, are 6 and 3. Isit hands her husband a piece of flatbread, still warm, and a cup of beer. Yes, beer for breakfast, but this is not the beer you might imagine. Egyptian beer is thick, nutritious, more like liquid bread than the clear alcoholic beverage of modern times. It is made from barley, flavored sometimes with dates or honey, and it is a staple of the Egyptian diet, drunk by everyone from pharaohs to laborers, by adults and children alike. It provides calories and nutrients, and because it is fermented, it is safer to drink than water, which might carry disease. Nakht eats quickly. The day's work calls. He picks up his hoe, a simple but effective tool, its wooden handle smoothed by years of use, its bronze blade still sharp. His son joins him, carrying a basket. Together they walk through the narrow lanes of the village, greeting neighbors who are also beginning their day. The village is coming alive now. Women are sweeping the dust from their doorways. Children are running and playing, their laughter bright in the morning air. Donkeys are being loaded with goods for market. Dogs are barking. The smell of baking bread drifts from several houses. Somewhere a baby is crying. Life, in all its ordinary complexity, is unfolding. Nakht and his son walk through the village and out into the fields. The land here is divided into many small plots, each marked by simple boundary stones. This is Nakhta's plot, about 2 acres, not large but enough to support his family if the harvest is good. The crops are growing well. At this time, when the floodwaters of the Nile have receded, leaving behind a rich, dark layer of alluvium, The growing season has begun for Pare. The seeds Nact planted weeks ago have sprouted and are now green and healthy. He is growing Ima wheat, which will be harvested in a few months and turned into bread and beer. He is also growing flax, which his wife will turn into linen yarn and weave into fabric. He is thoroughly enjoying life doing all of this, but crops need care. Nact walks through his field, checking for weeds, which he pulls by hand and tosses aside. He checks the irrigation channels, small ditches that carry water from a canal connected to the Nile. The channels need to be clear for water to flow properly. He uses his hoe to clear out some accumulated silt, ensuring the water can reach all parts of his field. His son helps, learning the skills he will need when he is grown and farming his own land. Nact teaches him to recognize different plants, to know when crops need more water, to understand the rhythms of the agricultural year. This knowledge, passed from father to son for countless generations, is the foundation of Egyptian civilization. As the sun climbs higher, the air grows warmer. Nact pauses occasionally to drink from a water skin made of leather. The work is hard but satisfying. There is a deep contentment in working the land, in coaxing life from the earth, in participating in the eternal cycle of planting and harvest. By midday, the heat is intense. Nact and his son return to the village for the main meal of the day. They will rest during the hottest hours, then return to the fields in the late afternoon when the sun is less fierce. As you watch Nact and his family, you realize that this is the life most Egyptians lived, century after century, millennium after millennium. The pharaohs built their monuments, the priests performed their rituals. The scribes kept their records, but underneath it all, Egypt was sustained by farmers like Nact, working the land, following the Nile's rhythms, living lives of quiet dignity and hard work. Let yourself rest now, peaceful and comfortable, as we prepare to explore other aspects of ancient Egyptian life. The artisan's workshop, creating beauty, drift now to another part of Thebes, to a workshop where skilled craftsmen are creating beautiful objects for the wealthy and powerful. Let yourself enter this world of artistry and craftsmanship, where skilled hands transform raw materials into works of art. The workshop belongs to a man named Amenhotep, a master craftsman who specializes in fine furniture. His workshop is a large, open space with a roof made of palm fronds supported by wooden poles, providing shade while allowing air to circulate. The walls are partially open, letting in light and breeze. Inside, several craftsmen are at work, each focused on their particular task. The air is filled with the sounds of their labor, the tap of wooden mallets, the rasp of copper saws, the scrape of sandstone abrading wood smooth, the smell of cedar wood, imported from Lebanon at great expense, mingles with the scent of beeswax and natural resins. Amenhotep himself is working on a chair commissioned by a wealthy merchant. This is not a simple, functional chair, but a piece of fine furniture designed to display the owner's wealth and taste. The frame is made of imported cedar, dark and beautifully grained. Amenhotep is inlaying pieces of ivory and ebony into the arms and back, creating geometric patterns of stunning precision. He works slowly, carefully, measuring each piece of inlay, testing the fit, then applying a natural adhesive made from animal hide boiled down to a glue. His hands are steady, his eyes focused. He has been training for this work since he was a boy, apprenticed to his father, who was also a furniture maker. He learned by watching, by practicing, by making mistakes and correcting them, by slowly developing the skills that now make him a master. Nearby, his apprentice, A boy of 14 named Kim is sanding a chest with a piece of sandstone. The work is tedious, but necessary. The wood must be smooth, perfectly smooth, before any decoration can be applied. Kemwasset's arms ache from the repetitive motion, but he does not complain. He knows that this is part of learning the craft. Someday, he too will be a master. With his own workshop and apprentices, another craftsman is painting decorative panels that will be attached to a large storage box. He uses natural pigments, red ochre from iron oxide, yellow from a different form of ochre, white from limestone, black from carbon. He mixes these pigments with water and a binding medium, then applies them with brushes made from reeds frayed at the end to create soft bristles. Asterisk. The painting is not random decoration, but meaningful symbolism. He paints lotus flowers, symbols of rebirth and creation. He paints the protective eye of Horus. He paints hieroglyphs spelling out wishes for prosperity and protection. Every element has meaning, connecting the object to Egypt's religious and symbolic vocabulary. In one corner of the workshop, a boy is working with leather, creating straps and bindings for various furniture pieces. In another corner, a craftsman is carving decorative elements from hippopotamus ivory, his small copper chisels clicking against the hard material. Amenhotep's workshop produces many different items: chairs, tables, beds, boxes, chests, headrests used instead of pillows in ancient Egypt, and other furniture. His clients are wealthy people who can afford fine furniture. Nobles, priests, successful merchants, high-ranking officials. For most Egyptians, furniture is simple and sparse, perhaps a few stools, some baskets, sleeping mats, but the wealthy surround themselves with beautiful, well-crafted objects. The workshop is also a social space. The craftsmen talk as they work, sharing news and gossip. Someone tells a joke and the others laugh. Someone else hums a tune and another joins in. The work is skilled and demanding, but it is also These men spend their days together, forming bonds of friendship and professional respect. At midday, they stop for their meal. Amenhotep's wife brings food from their house nearby: bread, onions, dried fish, and beer. The craftsmen sit in the shade, eating and resting before returning to work. Amenhotep takes pride in his work. He knows that the furniture he creates will last for generations, will be treasured by its owners, might even be placed in tombs to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. His work connects him to something larger than himself, to the great tradition of Egyptian craftsmanship that stretches back to the earliest dynasties. As you observe this workshop, you realize that ancient Egypt was built not just by pharaohs and their grand visions, but by skilled craftspeople like these, working day after day, creating the objects that filled Egyptian homes and tombs, that made Egyptian civilization not just powerful, but beautiful. Let yourself relax deeper as we continue our exploration of ancient Egyptian life. The scribes' day. Masters of knowledge, drift now to the temple complex of Karnak, that vast collection of temples, chapels, and administrative buildings dedicated primarily to the god Amun-Ra. Within this complex, in a cool, columned hall, sit several scribes, the educated elite of ancient Egypt. Let yourself observe one scribe in particular, a man named Yusuf. He sits cross-legged on a woven mat, his writing board across his lap. His posture is erect, his expression focused. Before him lies a partially unrolled papyrus, and in his hand he holds a reed brush, poised to write. Yuzahat is copying a religious text, a hymn to Amun-Ra that will be placed in the temple library. The original text, written perhaps a century ago, is showing signs of age, so new copies must be made to preserve the sacred words. This is important work, sacred work, requiring perfect accuracy and beautiful calligraphy. He dips his brush into one of the 2 cakes of ink on his palette, black ink, made from carbon soot, mixed with gum, Arabic, red ink made from red ochre. The black is for the main text, the red for headings and important words. The brush comes away from the ink cake moist and ready to write. Userhat forms the hieroglyphs with practiced precision. Each sign must be perfectly proportioned, properly placed, aesthetically pleasing. Hieroglyphic writing is not just communication, it is art. The signs are beautiful in themselves: birds, animals, human figures, plants, objects, all rendered in elegant, stylized form. The script reads, Adoration of Amen when he rises, as Horikti by the scribe, Userhat, true of voice. He says, Hail to thee, beautiful Ra of every day, who rises at dawn without ceasing. The words flow from his brush, sacred words praising the God who brings light and life. Hieroglyphs can be complex to write and read. They can be read left to right or right to left, depending on which way the signs face. Some signs represent sounds, others represent whole words or ideas. Some are used as determinatives, signs that clarify meaning without being pronounced. A skilled scribe must know hundreds of signs and understand the complex rules for combining them. But Userhat learned all this during his years of training. He came to scribal school as a young boy, the son of a scribe, which gave him the opportunity for education. Not everyone could become a scribe. Literacy was a privilege of the few. In the school, he learned to read and write hieroglyphs. He also learned hieratic, the cursive form of hieroglyphic writing used for everyday documents. He learned mathematics, how to calculate areas of fields, volumes of granaries, amounts of materials needed for construction projects. He learned literature, copying out famous texts like the Tale of Sinar and the instructions of Tehotep. His teachers were strict. There was a saying, a boy's ears are on his back, he hears when he is beaten. Discipline was harsh, but the reward for successful completion of training was entry into the scribal class, a privileged position in Egyptian society now. As an adult scribe employed by the temple, Userhat has status and security. He receives regular rations of grain, beer, and other goods. He wears clean white linen kilts, not the simple work clothes of farmers and laborers. He works indoors, in shade, not laboring under the hot sun. His hands are soft, uncalloused, holding a brush rather than a hoe. Other scribes in the same hall are working on different projects. One is recording inventory from the temple's warehouses, listing quantities of grain, wine, oil, and other goods received as offerings or tribute. Another is copying a letter from the high priest to a provincial administrator concerning the temple's landholdings. A third is working on accounts, calculating how much grain is owed to various temple employees. The work requires concentration and precision. Mistakes can have consequences. If a scribe miscalculates taxes, someone might pay too much or too little. If a scribe miscopies a sacred text, he might offend the gods. Accuracy is everything, but the work also has its satisfactions. Userhat takes pride in his beautiful calligraphy, in his accuracy, in his knowledge. He knows that literacy is power. Scribes are essential to the functioning of the state. They keep the records, transmit the orders, preserve the knowledge. Without scribes, The complex Egyptian state could not function. There is even a genre of Egyptian literature called instructions, in which older scribes advise younger ones about their profession. These texts praise the scribal profession and mock other occupations. The farmer suffers under the hot sun, while the scribe sits in the shade. The metalworker's hands are burned and smell like fish eggs. The potter is covered in mud like a pig. But the scribe, he is respected by all. As the afternoon wears on, Userhat completes his copying. He carefully checks his work against the original, making sure every sign is correct. Satisfied, he sprinkles fine sand over the wet ink to help it dry, then carefully rolls up the papyrus. Tomorrow he will begin another text. He stands, stretches his back sitting cross-legged for hours, can be uncomfortable, then gathers his writing materials, his palette, his water pot, his spare reeds. He places them carefully in a wooden box. These are his tools, precious to him, well-maintained. As you watch Userhat leave the temple, walking home through the streets of Thebes, you understand that scribes like him were the memory and mind of ancient Egypt, preserving knowledge, enabling administration, keeping civilization running smoothly through their mastery of the written word. Rest now, peacefully, as we continue our journey through ancient Egyptian life, the market, commerce, and community. Let yourself drift now to the market, a bustling, noisy, colorful place where people come to buy and sell goods, to meet friends, to hear news and gossip, to participate in the communal life of the city. The market is held in an open square near the river, where merchants and farmers can easily bring their goods. There are no permanent shops, no fixed stalls. Instead, people spread their wares on mats or in baskets, calling out to attract customers. Ancient Egypt does not use money, not coins or paper currency, at least not in this period. Instead, the economy runs on barter and measured exchange. Goods have values expressed in terms of standard units, the deben, a unit of weight equivalent to about 91 grams, and the kite, a smaller unit, 1/10 of a deben. These are not physical objects, but abstract measures of value. A loaf of bread might be worth 1/20 of a deben. A pair of sandals might be worth 2 deben. A cow might be worth 50 deben. Asterisk, asterisk, when someone wants to buy something, they offer goods of equivalent value. A farmer might exchange grain for a new hoe. A woman might trade cloth she has woven for vegetables and fish. If the values don't match exactly, additional small items are added to balance the exchange, or a debt is created to be settled later. Walk with me through the market now. Observe the incredible variety of goods available. Here is a farmer selling vegetables, onions, garlic, lettuce, cucumbers, and lentils. Onions are particularly popular in ancient Egypt, a staple of the diet eaten by everyone from pharaoh to laborer. The farmer's vegetables are fresh, picked this morning from his garden. Next to him, a fisherman has spread out his catch on a mat. Nile perch, catfish, tilapia, all caught at dawn in the river. The fish glisten in the sun, and the fisherman fans them to keep flies away. Fresh fish doesn't keep long in the Egyptian heat, so it must be sold quickly or preserved by drying or salting. A woman sits with baskets of dates and figs, sweet treats that are highly valued. Dates especially are treasured, used as sweeteners. Egypt has no sugar, eaten as snacks, made into date wine. Her dates are plump and fresh, recently harvested from the palm trees that grow throughout Egypt. A potter displays his wares, jars for storing grain, amphorae for wine and oil, small vessels for cosmetics. cups and bowls for eating and drinking. Egyptian pottery is practical and affordable, used in every household. The potter has worked for days to create this inventory, shaping the clay on his wheel, firing the vessels in his kiln, hoping to sell them all today. A metal worker shows bronze tools and copper implements, hoes, axes, chisels, needles, hooks, and knives. Bronze is valuable, it's an alloy of copper and tin must be imported from far away. Not everyone can afford bronze tools, but those who can find them superior to stone implements. A woman sells linen cloth, the product of months of work. Flax was grown, harvested, soaked, and beaten to separate the fibers. The fibers were spun into thread, a task done primarily by women, spinning constantly whenever they have a free moment, while talking, while watching children, while resting. The thread was woven on a horizontal loom into cloth. Now the cloth is for sale in various qualities, from coarse fabric for work clothes to fine, almost transparent linen for the garments of the wealthy. An old woman sits with baskets of medicinal herbs, coriander for digestion, cumin for cooking and medicine, fenugreek for various ailments, dried lotus flowers for their narcotic and therapeutic properties. She knows the uses of dozens of plants, knowledge passed down from her mother and grandmother. People come to her not just to buy herbs, but to ask advice about treating illnesses.